Many years ago, when Onivy Suleiman moved to Lokoja after ending a 5-year relationship that nearly crushed her spirit, she told herself she would focus only on her work, her peace, and her dreams. At 31, she had fought hard to build her small but successful fashion business, designing and selling beautiful ready-to-wear pieces from a boutique near Old Market Road. She had little time for romance and even less patience for disappointments. But somehow, no matter how much Onivy tried to avoid it, the topic of marriage followed her everywhere like kogi dust on a windy day. At weddings, at church, even at her boutique when customers came to sew asoebi, somebody always managed to ask the same exhausting question: Onivy, when will we eat your rice? And she always smiled politely, but inside, her chest tightened. The truth was simple. She wanted love, but she no longer trusted it. 4 years earlier, she had been engaged to Michael Audu, a handsome banker who had promised her the world, only to leave her 3 weeks before their introduction ceremony for a politician's daughter. That heartbreak nearly broke her, and since then, her woes became high and thick. One Saturday afternoon, as she sat in her boutique folding clothes, her two closest friends, Itopa and Feyintolu, barged in carrying roasted granuts and bottles of zobo like women on a mission. Onivy, Itopa announced dramatically and sat on the chair opposite her. Enough is enough. You cannot keep sewing fine dresses for other brides while refusing to become one yourself. Onivy rolled her eyes. And what exactly do you want me to do? Go to Ganaja Junction and carry a placard saying husband wanted? Feyintolu laughed so hard that her drink almost spilled. Not a placard, my dear. What you need is a profile. We have registered you on Love Unmasked. Onivy froze. You did what? Calm down, Itopa said. It's a matchmaking group for serious singles only. They arrange blind dates for professionals who are too busy to find love. At first, Onivy refused, but after hours of persuasion, countless eye rolls, and promises of just one date, she reluctantly agreed to try. Although, deep down, she had one secret fear. She didn't want to be used, lied to, or taken for granted again. That night, as she was scrolling through her messages, an idea struck her like sudden rainfall. What if I test them first? Her plan was simple but audacious. She would pretend to be a single mother with a 5-year-old child from a failed relationship. Any man who truly wanted her would accept her as she was. But those ones looking for perfect baggage-free women would disappear on their own. When she told her friends the next day, Feyintolu nearly dropped her meat pie. Onivy, are you sure about this madness? Onivy sipped her zobo calmly and smiled. It's better to know the truth now than after I've fallen in love again. The following Friday, Onivy dressed elegantly and went for her first blind date at a small restaurant near Kogi State Polytechnic. She arrived early, ordered pineapple juice, and waited. Minutes later, a tall, soft-spoken civil engineer walked in and smiled warmly. His name was Ismail, and the first 15 minutes of their conversation went smoothly until she casually mentioned having a 5-year-old son. The change was instant. The man's smile froze and his posture stiffened. Oh, you have a child? Onivy nodded, sipping her juice casually. Yes, his name is Farouk. Ismail cleared his throat and laughed awkwardly, but his next words stung. I see. You are a beautiful woman, Onivy, but honestly, I am still young. I am not sure I am ready to raise another man's child. She smiled politely, but inside, she made a mental note: disqualified. 2 weeks later, she met Musa, a successful businessman who walked into Villa Vista Cafe wearing designer shoes and expensive perfume. He was confident, funny, and romantic until she dropped the single mother detail. He leaned back in his chair, raised an eyebrow, and said with a smirk, "So, In other words, you are second-hand market. Onivy's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she kept her composure and sipped her juice slowly while nodding. I see, he said calmly. Thank you for your honesty, because I don't do bend down selects. Inside, Onivy wanted to pour her juice on his imported shirts, but she remembered her goal. Patience, not drama. So she let him go. However, by the third and fourth dates, the responses became predictable. One man politely excused himself to the restroom and never returned. Another bluntly said, I want a fresh start, not ready-made responsibility. Each rejection stung more than the last, and at night, Onivy would lie awake replaying their words in her head. Sometimes, she wondered if her test was a mistake, but then she reminded herself of her mission. It is better to get a heartbreak now than later. And then, one evening, just when she was considering giving up on the matchmaking group altogether, her phone blinked with a new message. Hi, I am Tossi Ochedi. Love unmasked matched us. Would you like to meet for coffee? She stared at his profile picture. He was clean-shaven, well-dressed, with kind, steady eyes. Something about his message felt different. It was simple, respectful, and with no forced jokes or shallow compliments. She hesitated, then typed back, Sure, Saturday works. And for the first time in weeks, she caught herself smiling. Saturday afternoon came and Onivy Suleiman arrived early, dressed in a pastel chiffon blouse and black trousers. She sat at a corner table, nervously tracing her finger around the rim of her juice glass and rehearsing her single mother story for the 100th time. Then she looked up and saw him. Tossi Ochedi, as she expected. He was tall, clean-shaven and dressed in a white shirt and navy blue chinos. He walked towards her table with a warm smile that reached his eyes. Something about his demeanor made her sit a little straighter. She was suddenly aware of her heartbeats. Onivy, he said and extended his hand. Yes, she replied and stood to shake his hand. You must be Tossi. They sat and the first few minutes passed in casual conversation. Tossi ordered black coffee and a plate of suya spring rolls. The atmosphere slowly grew comfortable because, unlike her previous blind dates, he wasn't forcing jokes, bragging about his salary or scanning the room for prettier women. He listened when she spoke, leaned forward slightly when she described her boutique and nodded thoughtfully like someone genuinely paying attention. It almost disarmed her. Almost. And then the moment she had dreaded came. She sipped her juice and gently dropped the test. There is something I think you should know before we talk further, she said, keeping her tone casual. I have a son. He's 5. She waited for the sign of discomfort, the first smile or the gradual withdrawal she had come to expect. But Tossi didn't flinch. He didn't frown. He didn't shift and he didn't avert his eyes. Instead, he smiled and complimented her. Raising a child alone takes a lot of strength. I respect that. You are strong. Onivy blinked, momentarily lost for words. There was no polite exit strategy or no backhanded comments about baggage, just acceptance and admiration. After that first meeting, Tossi became consistent. He didn't bombard her with constant messages, but every morning, like clockwork, there was a good morning, hope you slept well, waiting on her phone. Some evenings, he sent her funny memes, prayers, or random questions about her favorite meals. Their second date was at a dinner at a riverside garden, where they ate roasted fish and sweet plantains, while talking about life, dreams, and the endless chaos of dating in Nigeria. Tossi suddenly said, do you know how rare it is to meet someone who talks more about purpose than gossip? Onivy smiled, and do you know how rare it is to meet a man who listens without interrupting? He laughed and leaned back in his chair. Tuche. Slowly, Onivy's walls began to lower, but each time she laughed with Tossi, and each time she felt the ease of his company, her guilt stabbed her a little deeper. She wanted to tell him the truth that she was not a single mother, but every time she rehearsed the words in her head, fear silenced her. If he thinks I lied from the start, he will walk away, she told herself one night, hugging her pillow. Let me just wait a little longer. I will tell him later. But that later kept stretching. And then 2 weeks later, Tossi invited her to dinner at a restaurant on Ibrahim Taiwo Road. When she walked in, she immediately noticed he wasn't alone. Sitting beside Tossi was a woman in her late 30s, elegantly dressed in a green Ankara gown. Tossi stood to hug her. Onivy, meet my elder sister, Yejide Ochedi. Onivy smiled politely and extended her hand. It's nice to meet you, Yejide. Yejide's handshake was firm but brief, and her eyes scanned Onivy's face with intensity, like someone who could see straight through smiles into lies. Dinner started smoothly enough. Tossi was his usual calm and thoughtful self, steering the conversation between his two favorite women, laughing occasionally, asking Onivy about her boutique, and sharing family jokes. But Yejide said very little. She was observing silently, and then casually, she dropped the question that made Onivy's chest tighten. Onivy, I went through your Instagram page today. You've got lovely work on your designs, by the way, but I couldn't help noticing something. Onivy smiled, masking the sudden rush of heat in her chest. Oh, what's that? Yejide leaned back and crossed her arms. For someone who talks so lovingly about her 5-year-old son, I couldn't find a single photo, video, or even a hint of him anywhere on your page. Strange, isn't it? The words hung in the air like a dropped glass. Tossi slowly turned towards her. Onivy started laughing. Oh, Dad, she said smoothly. I don't like putting him online. Privacy, you know. Yejide's lips curved slightly and nodded. Dinner continued, but Onivy's appetite vanished. Every bite now felt heavy. Every laughter felt forced, and Tossi's silence on the drive home was heavier than stone. She also noticed that over the next few days, Tossi became strangely quiet and watched her more than usual. He didn't question her openly, but she caught him looking at her closely, as if he were connecting invisible dots. One evening, after walking her to her car, he paused and said, Onivy, next time, bring Farouk along. I would love to meet him. Her throat went dry instantly. She quickly nodded. Of course, someday. Another time, Tossi took her out to Sachi's rooftop lounge, and at first, everything was pleasant. He complimented her outfit, held her hand, and even teased her about always ordering Zobo instead of wine. But halfway through the evening, he dropped a question casually, like someone talking about the weather. So, where does Farouk school again? Onivy's fur froze mid-air, but she quickly forced a calm smile. He's in Abuja with my auntie. That's where he schools. I only see him during the holidays. Tossi nodded thoughtfully and leaned back in his chair. Interesting. But I thought you said he was in Makurdi with your cousin's wife. Her throat went dry. She blinked and laughed awkwardly. Oh, I meant he used to be there. He moved to Abuja 2 months ago. Tossi smiled but said nothing. Well, his silence was worse than any confrontation. 2 days later, Yejide invited Tossi for lunch at her house. Onivy didn't know it yet, but Yejide was determined to protect her brother. Over pepper soup, Yejide leaned back on the sofa and studied her brother's face. Tossi, you like her, don't you? Tossi smiled. I do. She's different. Yejide nodded slowly. She's beautiful, no doubt, but I have learned something in life. People hide things when they desperately want to be loved. Tossi frowned slightly and dropped his spoon. Yejide, she held up a hand. Wait, I am not saying she's bad. I am just saying ask questions. Small things don't add up. No pictures, no stories, and she's always vague about her son. If you want to build a future, Tossi, don't build it on sand. Tossi said nothing, but Yejide's words stayed with him. That night, as he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling fan, he decided, I need to know the truth. That weekend, Tossi and Onivy went on a casual dinner date at Golden View restaurant. While waiting for their food, Tossi's scrolled through Instagram and suddenly paused. "Hey," he said and turned his phone to her. "Is this your boutiques page?" Onivy smiled proudly. "Yes, that's it." He nodded slowly, scrolling through her designs, her travels and her friends. But there was no child. Not even one blurry photo, one tiny caption, or one random toy on the background shelf. Nothing. He frowned. "Onivy, do you mean to tell me you've had Farouk for 5 years and not once did you share anything about him? Not even a birthday cake?" Her chest tightened. She laughed nervously. "Tossi, I'm a very private person. You know how social media can be. I don't want strangers knowing about my child." Tossi smiled and leaned forward, staring at her. "I understand privacy, but I also understand when someone is hiding something." The words landed softly, but they cut deep. Onivy looked away, pretending to admire the restaurant's lights, but her mind was spinning. Unfortunately, over the next week, Tossi started observing her more closely. When she spoke about Farouk, her details kept shifting. Sometimes her son was in Abuja, sometimes he was in Okene, sometimes with her auntie, and sometimes with her cousin. He noticed she never received calls from homework teachers or babysitters, and there had never been background noise of a child whenever she picked his calls at night. To make matters worse, whenever he casually suggested meeting Farouk, her answers grew shorter and vaguer. Meanwhile, Onivy began losing sleep. She would lay awake at night replaying her conversations and trying to stitch her stories together so they wouldn't unravel. But the inconsistencies were already showing. "Just one more month," she encouraged herself one night. "I'll tell him everything after I'm sure he really loves me." But what she didn't know was that Tossi had already decided to test her the same way she had tested him. One Wednesday, Tossi called unexpectedly. "Onivy, clear your Saturday. We are driving to Ibaji. Mommy wants to meet you and Farouk." Onivy's phone nearly slipped from her hand. "What?" "Tossi, Ibaji, that's like 4 hours away." He smiled. "Don't worry, I'll drive. Mommy already bought a gift for your son. She can't wait to meet him." For a moment, Onivy couldn't breathe. Her palms grew damp and her throat tightened. "Oh, Tossi, Farouk is still in Abuja with my auntie right now." "Perfect," Tossi replied smoothly. "Then we'll video call him instead." The silence from her end stretched so long that Tossi thought the line had gone dead. Then he said, "Onivy, see you on Saturday." He ended the call before she could even respond. Onivy sat frozen on her bed. Her chest was pounding and her mind was screaming. The walls she had carefully built were collapsing faster than she could control. For 3 nights straight, she couldn't sleep properly. Her heart had been in a constant drum roll since Tossi dropped the bomb. "Clear your Saturday. We are going to Ibaji. Mommy wants to meet you and Farouk." Even now, standing in front of her mirror on Saturday morning, brushing her hair, her reflection looked pale and restless. She dabbed lip gloss on her trembling lips and muttered to herself like a mantra, "Stay calm, Onivy. Just stay calm. Somehow you'll handle this." But deep inside, she knew she had no idea on how to untangle the lie she had woven. By 9:30 a.m., Tossi's silver Toyota pulled up in front of her boutique. He stepped out, looking calm, collected, and devastatingly handsome in a cream-colored senator that matched the softness of his expression. "Good morning, beautiful," he said warmly, kissing her cheek. She smiled, hiding her anxiety. "Morning, Tossi." They set off on the road, cruising past the familiar Lokoja Old Market and past the endless stretch of palm trees lining the highway. For the first 30 minutes, Tossi filled the silence with stories about his childhood, like his mother's obsession with gardening, and funny tales about Yejide chasing him around the house when he annoyed her as a child. Halfway through the drive, he turned towards her. "I can't wait for Mama to see you. She has already bought Farouk a gift. She keeps talking about her grandson." The words landed like a stone in her stomach. She laughed awkwardly and held her hand back tighter. That's sweet of her. Sweet? Tosin glanced at her briefly. She even asked me if he likes football. I told her yes. Onivy's throat tightened. She nodded quickly, praying silently for the ground to open and swallow her whole. The rest of the drive passed by in uncomfortable silence, and by midday, they arrived at Mama Ochedi's home, a bungalow surrounded by mango trees and red soil. Tosin's mother came to the door with open arms and exclaimed, "My daughter, welcome, welcome. Tossi has told me so much about you." Onivy smiled nervously. "Thank you, ma." Inside the living room was simple but cozy. It was decorated with family photos, wooden furniture, and hibiscus flowers. Mama insisted they sit and she offered them food immediately. "I cooked egusi soup specially for you," she said proudly, handing Onivy a plate. Onivy thanked her, trying to focus on eating, but her appetite was nowhere to be found. Every time Mama mentioned Farouk, Onivy's stomach twisted harder. Halfway through the meal, Tosin leaned back casually and swallowed his glass of juice before speaking. "Mommy, I promised Onivy would make today special. You've heard so much about Farouk. Why don't we video call him now? You can talk to your grandson yourself." Immediately, the spoon slipped from Onivy's hands, clattering against the plate. Her heart stopped. Tossi, she stammered. "Farouk might be sleeping. He had a fever last night, and my auntie said he needed to rest." Tosin nodded slowly. "All right, then we can call later before we leave. I would like to at least see his face for once." At this point, every muscle in Onivy's body tightened. She excused herself to the bathroom, gripping the sink with trembling hands as she whispered frantically, "God, please, please get me out of this." When she returned, Tosin stood near the window, watching her silently. Mama had stepped into the kitchen, leaving them alone. Finally, Tosin spoke sharply. "Onivy, we don't have to call Farouk because I already know the truth." The air between them thickened instantly. Her breath caught in her throat and her legs felt like stone. "Tosin, please. I can explain." Tosin shook his head slowly. "You tested me, Onivy. You wanted to see if I would still want you as a single mother. But you didn't think you owed me honesty along the line. You didn't think I deserved the truth." Tears stung her eyes. "I was scared, Tosin. I have been hurt before. I just needed to know who was real." Tosin stepped closer with a mixture of anger and disappointment on his face. "And did you think I wasn't scared too? That I haven't been lied to before? That I haven't been betrayed?" Onivy lowered her face in shame. Just then, Mama Ochedi returned, holding a tray of cold zobo. She paused, sensing the tension in the air. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking from Tosin to Onivy. Tosin forced a smile. "It's nothing, Mama. We'll talk later." Mama nodded slowly, placed the tray down and excused them. The ride back to Lokoja was silent that evening. Tosin's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, while Onivy sat curled against the door, staring out of the window. The silence in the car was louder than any shouting or anger. When they finally arrived outside her house, Tosin parked but didn't turn off the engine. He stared straight ahead. "I liked you, Onivy. I really did. But trust is the one thing I can't compromise on." Onivy swallowed hard. "Tosin, please, give me a chance to make this right." But Tosin shook his head slowly, refusing to look at her. "Go inside, Onivy. Thank you for your time." She opened the door with trembling hands, stepped out quietly and watched him drive away. 3 days passed, then 5, then 7 days, but Tossi hadn't called. At first, Onivy told herself he just needed space, that he was processing everything, and that he would come back when the anger cooled. But by the second week, reality settled in like cold water on her skin. Tossi had no plan to speak to her, and the silence was suffocating. Every morning, she still woke up reaching for her phone, staring at the blank screen and hoping to see his name flash. But nothing came. No calls, no messages, not even the usual "good morning sunshine." Every day stretched painfully. She tried burying herself in work at her boutique, but that only brought her little relief. Her friends Itopa and Feyintolu dropped by almost daily trying to cheer her up, but Onivy's laughter almost sounded hollow. Itopa told her one afternoon, "Onivy, you need to give him time." "Time?" Onivy whispered, staring at the fabric in her hands blankly. "Does he really need time, or am I just waiting for someone who has already walked away?" Unfortunately, by the third week, the real storm began, and it had Yejide Ochedi's name written all over it. Word travels fast in Lokoja, but when Yejide whispers, it travels faster than a flooded river Niger. At first, Onivy overheard it at the borehole behind her street. Two women spoke in low voices. "Na she, the designer that pretended to be a single mother to catch rich men. My sister told me. Yejide said it herself. Imagine lying about a whole child just to trap her brother." Unfortunately, by the end of that week, the gossip had spread beyond her neighborhood. Regular clients who used to walk into her boutique with bright smiles now stopped coming entirely. Others slowed down and her WhatsApp message dried up. One afternoon, Mama Dorcas, one of her most loyal customers, called her. "My daughter, forgive me, but I cannot place orders for now. I heard some things at the church women's fellowship. People are saying you are not straightforward." Onivy sat frozen at her cutting table with the phone trembling in her hand. She managed to whisper, "I understand, Mama, thank you." That night, she turned off the lights in her boutique early and sat on the floor, hugging her knees and weeping uncontrollably. 2 days later, Feyintolu stormed into the boutique, holding 2 packs of meat pie and 2 bottles of chilled zobo. She dropped them on the table, crossed her arms and glared at Onivy. "Enough of this crying, Onivy. You can't stay like this forever." Onivy lifted her red swollen eyes. "You don't understand, Feyi. I destroyed everything. My business, my reputation, Tossi, everything." "No," Feyintolu said firmly as she sat beside her. "You made a mistake, yes, but you didn't kill anybody. Stop letting guilt bury you alive." Onivy shook her head slowly. "I lied to the only good man I have met in years, Feyi, and now his sister has finished me publicly." Feyintolu sighed and reached for her hand. "Then fight. Fight for your business. Fight for your peace. And if you still love Tossi, fight for him too." 2 evenings later, Onivy closed her boutique early and stopped by Sachi's rooftop lounge to grab a cold drink, hoping to clear her head. But as she walked past the glass windows, her chest tightened. Tossi was there. He was seated at the far end, laughing with his longtime friend over a plate of grilled fish. He looked calm, composed, and untouched by the storm consuming her life. For a moment, Onivy wanted to turn and leave, but before she could move, Tossi's eyes lifted and found hers. Neither of them smiled or waved. Then Tossi looked away and returned to his conversation without a word. Onivy's knees almost gave way. She walked back to her car slowly with her heart pounding. As she sat behind the wheel, she broke down and gripped the steering wheel as tears spilled freely. "I have lost him," she whispered into the car. "I have truly lost him." Unfortunately, by the end of the month, Onivy's boutique revenue had dropped by nearly half. She struggled to pay her staff and rent, and each new client's cancellation felt like another blow. One night, she sat on her bed, hugged her pillow, and said a prayer she hadn't said in years. "God, I just wanted love. I just wanted someone to stay. Why is everything falling apart?" At that moment, her phone vibrated. She grabbed it instantly, hoping and praying it was Tossi. But it was a WhatsApp group notification. "Yejide Ochedi added you." Her stomach dropped. She opened the group chat to see Yejide's first message pinned. "Ladies, please, let us advise our brothers. A woman who builds love on deception will destroy their future. Always protect their hearts." Below, there were 20 messages from strangers discussing her name, her boutique, and her scam. It was public now. There was no hiding anymore. That night, just as Onivy prepared to switch off her phone, a single message came in. It was from Chuka, Tosin's friend. He is hurt, Onivy, more than you realize, but he still talks about you. Onivy stared at the message for several seconds. Her chest rose and fell. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "What do I do?" After a minute, the reply came. "Be honest all the way. If you want him back, you will have to fight. But I'll warn you, he may not forgive you easily." Onivy set the phone down slowly as her tears soaked the pillow. Her heart was torn between shame and longing. The next day, Onivy dressed in a cream blouse and black trousers with no makeup and no pretenses. She drove to Sachi's rooftop lounge, the place where she and Tossi had shared their first quiet evening. There, she sent him a message. "Tossi, please, I am here. Just give me 5 minutes." She didn't expect him to come, but surprisingly, 10 minutes later, Tossi walked in. Her chest tightened when she saw him. He was still calm, steady and composed as ever, but his expression showed a guarded distance, like someone keeping their heart behind locked doors. He sat opposite her without saying a word. He just folded his arms across his chest, and the silence between them stretched painfully, so thick that it almost suffocated her. Finally, she spoke up. "Tossi, I came to apologize. I know I hurt you. I lied, and I am not proud of it. I thought pretending to be a single mother would help me find out who truly loved me, but I was wrong. I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth." Tossi looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back slightly and spoke calmly. "Do you know what hurts me most, Onivy? It is not the lie itself, but the fact that you didn't think I deserved the truth, that you decided for me what I could handle instead of letting me choose for myself." Onivy's lips trembled as tears filled her eyes. "I was scared, Tossi. Every man I've trusted has broken me. I thought if you stayed after knowing that you were different, I didn't mean to hurt you." For the first time, a bitter smile appeared on his lips. He rested his elbows on the table and said, "You know what is funny? I already knew." Onivy blinked. You what?" "I knew," Tossi repeated, "before Ibaji. After our second meeting, I knew you were lying." Onivy stared at him speechless. Tossi continued, "I noticed things, Onivy. There were no photos, no school runs, no calls from teachers. Your stories kept changing, and Yejide confirmed it when she checked your profile. But I didn't confront you immediately because..." He paused as his jaw tightened. "Because I wanted to see how far you would go with the lie. I wanted to see if you would at least open up." Onivy bowed her head as shame burned through her like fire. "So you tested me too?" Tossi nodded slowly. "I needed to know the real you, the woman who laughs when she talks about her dreams, the one who designs dresses late into the night because she believes in beauty, the one I was falling for." Tossi's voice cracked slightly on the last words, and for the first time since Ibaji, his calmness broke. But the pain in his eyes was deeper than any anger could. Onivy reached across the table to touch him, but he pulled his hands away gently. She whispered, "Tossi, I love you. I know I broke your trust, but I am begging you, give me a chance to make this right." Tossi looked at her, and his expression softened for the briefest moment before hardening again. "I love you too, Onivy," he admitted, "but love isn't enough. Without trust, we'll just be two people hurting each other." Silence swallowed the space between them as they both sat there for minutes without saying a thing. Finally, Tossi exhaled deeply and leaned back in his chair. "I need time. Real time. I need to heal from this. You need to rebuild yourself too. If we are meant to find each other again, we will. But right now, I can't stay." Onivy opened her mouth, but no sound came out. A single tear fell down from her cheek as she nodded slowly. Tossi stood up and slipped his hands into his pockets. He looked at her one last time with a mixture of love and disappointment. Then he turned and walked away. This time, he did not look back. 6 months later, Onivy concentrated on rebuilding her boutique. She took business courses and started attending women's networking events. She also stopped hiding from the gossip and began showing up everywhere with her head held high. Clients returned little by little, and her reputation recovered even though the scars remained. And then, one evening, her phone vibrated and she was surprised when she saw the name, Tossi Ochedi. She stared at the message for several seconds before opening it. I am single. If we both stop testing love and start trusting it, maybe we'll get it right this time. Are you still single? Onivy's lips curved into a small happy smile, but she didn't reply immediately. This time, she would think carefully before taking the next step, because some lessons are too costly to repeat. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lesson did you learn from this story? Share the story out with your loved ones and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!